Something explosive is brewing in Cleveland, and the closer you look, the more it feels like the Browns are standing inches away from a full organizational shakeup. The tension isn't subtle anymore. It's loud, it's messy, and according to people close to the situation, it's reaching a point where someone at the top is finally ready to pull the plug. Jimmy Haslam, a man who usually stays patient longer than fans would like, is reportedly fed up. The offense looks stale. The team can't take advantage of a championship-level defense, and the frustration building around Kevin Stefanski has now turned into something much heavier. It's the kind of pressure that doesn't fade away after a win. It lingers, it spreads, and it forces conversations no one expected to happen this early. And right in the middle of all this chaos, a name suddenly appears out of nowhere. A name big enough to flip the entire NFL news cycle on its head: Jon Gruden. Rumors suggest the Browns haven't just looked at him. They've talked, they've evaluated. Some insiders even claim he's not a candidate, he's the candidate. The one person ownership believes could walk into the building tomorrow and completely rewrite the identity of this offense. But the most surprising part? This isn't only about replacing a struggling coach. This is about building the perfect environment around one player, Shedeur Sanders, whose arrival has quietly reshaped every decision happening behind the scenes. Cleveland hasn't confirmed anything, but the noise is growing louder by the hour. And if even half of these whispers are true, the Browns might be preparing for one of the biggest coaching moves the franchise has made in years. Because something is about to break, and it's coming faster than anyone expected. For months, the Cleveland Browns tried to keep things calm on the surface, but anyone paying attention could feel the cracks forming. The offense wasn't just inconsistent, it looked lost. Drives stalled, play designs felt outdated, and even in games where the defense dominated, the offense refused to match that energy. Week after week, the frustration didn't just come from fans. It spread inside the building, inching all the way to the owner's office. Jimmy Haslam is known for being passionate, competitive, and willing to take risks. But he's also known for something else. Once he's done waiting, the decision comes fast. And everything happening behind the scenes suggested he had finally reached that point. People inside the league began whispering that Haslam was tired of watching a championship-caliber defense get wasted by an offense that couldn't stay on the field long enough to give them a chance. What made things even more volatile was how predictable the problems had become. Stefanski's system, once praised for creativity, suddenly felt rigid and outdated. Analysts called it high school football. Former players questioned why Shedeur Sanders, a young quarterback with natural talent and undeniable poise, was stuck in a scheme that didn't maximize anything he brought to the table. And every time Shedeur took a hit behind the line, the criticism got louder. Behind closed doors, Haslam reportedly began asking tougher questions. Why isn't the offense evolving? Why does the quarterback look uncomfortable in every game? Why does the team feel stuck in neutral, despite having pieces most franchises would kill for? It wasn't just Stefanski either. Tomlin Reese and even GM Andrew Berry were suddenly part of the conversation. The deeper Haslam looked, the more he felt the same conclusion pulling at him. The structure wasn't working. Something fundamental had to change. And just as that frustration reached its peak, a new name started circulating in pre-discussions. A name bold enough to reset the entire direction of the team. A name tied to experience, intensity, and a willingness to rebuild an offense from the ground up. But that wasn't the whole story, because who that name was and why it emerged now would shock everyone watching. The moment Jon Gruden's name slipped into the conversation, everything around the Browns shifted. It didn't come from a press release or a carefully worded statement. It came from a surge of whispers, fast, messy, and impossible to ignore. One insider mentioned it, then another repeated it. And within hours, the rumor spread louder than anything Cleveland had heard all season. Reports claim the Browns didn't just talk about Gruden internally. They held what some personnel executives described as advanced discussions, suggesting this wasn't a casual inquiry. It was intentional. It was serious. And it caught the entire football world off guard. Gruden wasn't being floated as an outside possibility. He was being positioned as someone the Browns might already be preparing to bring in. Social media picked it up immediately. Tweets, screenshots, and reaction threads exploded, with fans arguing whether the move was brilliant, desperate, or something in between. But what truly fueled the fire were the comments from league insiders who insisted Gruden wasn't a candidate, he was the candidate. The one with momentum, the one ownership seemed fixated on. And then the details got even more interesting. Gruden is an Ohio native. He grew up a Browns fan. He understands the culture, the passion, and the expectations that come with coaching in a city that lives and breathes football. For many fans, that alone made the rumor feel more real. For Haslam, it reportedly made the fit even more appealing. Add in Gruden's reputation as a hands-on offensive mind, someone who loves molding quarterbacks, diagnosing defenses, and rebuilding systems, and the narrative began writing itself. People close to the situation claimed he had been intrigued by the Browns roster for months. Some even said he believed he could turn Shedeur Sanders into a franchise star if given the chance. Whether every detail was accurate or not didn't really matter. The timing mattered. The momentum mattered. The noise mattered. Because Gruden's name didn't enter the conversation by accident. It entered because the Browns were finally ready to consider something drastic. Something that signaled the Stefanski era was running out of time fast. And just as Gruden's buzz started to rise, another factor pushed the story into overdrive. One connected directly to the young quarterback the franchise refuses to waste. The reason Jon Gruden's name stuck so quickly and spread even faster is because, strangely enough, he fits almost too perfectly into what the Browns seem to be searching for. Not just a coach with experience, but someone who carries a specific blend of intensity, offensive expertise, and cultural familiarity that lines up with the direction Jimmy Haslam reportedly wants to take this team. For starters, Gruden's Ohio roots aren't just trivia. He grew up in the state. He understood the emotional weight of being a Browns fan long before he ever coached in the NFL. When someone with that background becomes connected to a job like this, it resonates differently. Fans relate to it. Ownership sees value in it. And in a market like Cleveland, where loyalty means everything, that connection matters more than people realize. But the deeper reason Gruden's name refuses to go away is tied directly to his offensive identity. Whatever people think of him, one thing has always been clear. He loves quarterbacks. He obsesses over film. He breaks down defenses like a surgeon, and he's known for being hands-on with young passers who need structure, confidence, and a system that accentuates what they already do well. That's where Shedeur Sanders comes into the picture, and where the rumor turns from interesting to explosive. According to multiple speculative reports, Gruden has spoken highly of Shedeur in the past. Some insiders claim he views him as a modern, composed quarterback who just needs an NFL-caliber offensive blueprint to reach his potential. Others say he finds the Browns roster intriguing, especially with the mix of young skill players and a defense capable of buying time for offensive growth. Whether those claims are perfectly accurate or not doesn't change one thing. The fit makes sense. Too much sense. Gruden brings the aggressive creativity the Browns have lacked. He brings a mindset built around maximizing quarterbacks. And he brings the kind of confidence Haslam reportedly wants guiding the next era of the franchise. It's the combination of hometown ties, offensive mastery, and a supposed admiration for the Browns' young quarterback that makes the rumor feel believable. even if no one has confirmed anything publicly. And once that connection became public chatter, another layer of the story emerged. A layer centered around the one player who unknowingly reshaped the entire direction of the franchise. If there's one person who unintentionally turned the Browns' entire organization upside down, it's Shedeur Sanders. Not because he asked for it, and not because he walked into Cleveland trying to spark a power struggle, but because his presence alone exposed every weakness the franchise had been trying to hide. The moment he arrived, the spotlight followed. And once that national attention locked onto Cleveland, the pressure shifted to everyone around him. Shedeur wasn't just another rookie quarterback. He came in with hype, expectations, and a fan base that watched his every move. And while that kind of attention can energize a franchise, it can also expose everything that isn't working. That's exactly what happened with Kevin Stefanski's offense. Week after week, critics noticed the same pattern: a predictable scheme, limited creativity, and a playbook that didn't seem built for a modern passer. Analysts said it, former players said it, even fans said it, loudly. And once the offense stalled, people inside the league began asking a bigger question: how can anyone evaluate Shedeur when the system around him looks outdated? Rumors circulated that Jimmy Haslam shared that same concern. Some insiders claimed he believed Shedeur's development was being slowed down, not supported. Others said he viewed the quarterback as a long-term investment, the type of player you build a franchise around, not one you force into a rigid, underperforming scheme. This is where the tension with Paul DePodesta reportedly started. DePodesta was rumored to be hesitant about drafting Shedeur in the first place. Not because of talent, but because he knew what the spotlight would bring: scrutiny, pressure, and a demand for results that would leave no room for internal mistakes. Haslam allegedly ignored those warnings, convinced that Shedeur's upside, on the field and at the box office, was worth everything. And in a way, Haslam was right. Shedeur brought excitement, ticket sales, attention, and relevance. But he also brought accountability. Suddenly, every coaching flaw stood out. Every offensive misfire looked worse. Every questionable decision became amplified. That's why Gruden's name suddenly felt so important. If the Browns were going to protect their young quarterback and build an offense tailored to his strengths, they needed someone bold enough to design it from scratch. But the arrival of that rumor didn't just threaten the coaching room. It pushed Stefanski toward a moment he could no longer avoid. As the pressure around the Browns intensified, the conversation surrounding Kevin Stefanski shifted from criticism to something far more serious: uncertainty about his future. What started as frustration over the offense gradually turned into a steady stream of rumors suggesting that Stefanski himself might already be preparing for the end. And the timing of these whispers was impossible to ignore. The first sign came from a surprising place: talk that Stefanski's camp had begun quietly reaching out to other teams. According to several speculative reports, his agent had already notified front offices around the league that Stefanski would be available if Cleveland chose to move on. That kind of move doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a coach can feel the walls closing in and wants to control the next step before the decision is made for him. Once that rumor spread, everything accelerated. Analysts pointed out that you don't see agents floating a coach's name unless the writing is already etched into the wall. Former players said the same thing. It looked like Stefanski was bracing for a change he knew was coming. Even local media began connecting the dots, questioning why the story leaked at this exact moment. And the more people talked, the more obvious it became that this wasn't a coincidence. The offense's struggles didn't help him. With a defense performing at a historic level and Myles Garrett having a season worthy of award discussions, the Browns still found ways to lose games they should have controlled. Fans were furious. They saw a quarterback running what many called a high school offense and believed the scheme was holding Shedeur Sanders back. That frustration turned into a narrative, one that painted Stefanski as a coach who couldn't adjust, couldn't innovate, and couldn't elevate the team when it mattered most. Inside the organization, the same concerns reportedly echoed. Haslam's patience was thinning. Executives were questioning direction, and the sense of momentum pushing Cleveland toward a major coaching shift grew stronger by the day. Stefanski wasn't just dealing with criticism anymore. He was dealing with inevitability, and once that feeling becomes real inside an NFL building, it's nearly impossible to reverse. But even as Stefanski's future dimmed, another figure inside the building saw his influence rising. A defensive mastermind who suddenly found himself in the center of the Browns' next chapter. While the offense sputtered and Stefanski's future grew shakier by the week, one figure inside the Browns building quietly gained more influence than anyone expected. Jim Schwartz. He didn't chase headlines, didn't leak anything, and didn't need to sway public opinion. His work spoke loudly enough. Every week, his defense stepped onto the field and looked like this. Backbone of a contender, fast, disciplined, and prepared for anything. In a season filled with turmoil, Schwartz became the steady force the Browns could rely on. That's why when Stefanski's job started to feel increasingly unstable, the conversation about his replacement didn't take long to form. Rumors began circulating that Haslam had no intention of letting Schwartz leave the organization. Several insiders claimed the owner saw him as the safest and most logical option to stabilize the team if a coaching change happened. After all, the defense wasn't just good, it was elite. And Haslam knew losing Schwartz would mean losing the one part of the team that consistently performed at a championship level. What made the whispers even more compelling was the reported relationship between Schwartz and Jon Gruden. People close to the situation suggested the two shared mutual respect, making it easier to imagine a setup where Schwartz took over as head coach while Gruden rebuilt the offense. That kind of partnership, a defensive mastermind paired with an offensive architect, gave fans something to latch onto. It sounded bold, balanced, and exactly the kind of shift Cleveland needed after years of relying on a single coaching identity. Behind closed doors, some executives reportedly believed Schwartz deserved another shot at being a head coach. His previous stint in Detroit showed flashes of strong leadership, and his ability to elevate a defense filled with both veterans and rising stars only strengthened his case. The Browns' locker room trusted him, the league respected him, and the results were undeniable. So as Stefanski's situation grew more precarious, Schwartz's name rose higher on the internal list of potential successors. It wasn't drama, it wasn't noise, it was simple logic. The kind of move that could keep the Browns' most valuable strength intact, while allowing the offense to be rebuilt from the ground up. But even with Schwartz rising, the final decision still depended on something much bigger. A single moment that could determine how quickly the Browns pulled the trigger on a total reset. As rumors surrounding Gruden and Schwartz intensified, the entire organization found itself staring at one looming variable: timing. Everyone inside the building understood that if a change was coming, it couldn't be random. It had to be deliberate, calculated. And according to multiple speculative reports, the Browns had already circled a moment on the calendar that could dictate everything: the next game. It wasn't just another Sunday matchup. It wasn't about playoff positioning or stat chasing. It was a test, a measurement of progress that ownership felt they still hadn't seen from Stefanski's offense. Insiders claimed Jimmy Haslam wanted to know one thing: could this coaching staff finally elevate Shedeur Sanders? Or were they holding him back? That question hovered over every practice, every meeting, every snap leading into game day. The pressure was enormous. Players felt it. Assistants felt it. And Stefanski, despite trying to stay focused, couldn't escape the sense that the team's future and his own was hanging on a single performance. Even media personalities started saying the quiet part out loud. If the Browns stumbled again, especially on offense, the conversation would shift from speculation to expectation. Rumors also hinted at late-night meetings involving top executives, where Haslam and decision-makers discussed scenarios ranging from an immediate firing to a postseason overhaul. Some insiders insisted the outcome of this game could speed up the clock on everything, including the possibility of Gruden stepping in sooner than anyone expected. Not in January, not in the offseason, but potentially within days. And that wasn't all. Fan influence started creeping into the equation. The louder the frustrations grew, the harder it became for ownership to ignore. Talk show hosts, analysts, and social media voices kept pointing out the same painful truth. The Browns were wasting a championship-level defense while running an offense that couldn't get out of its own way. Haslam, never one to sit still when the heat rises, reportedly began viewing this game as the tipping point. A strong performance might buy Stefanski time. Another disappointing outing could open the door to immediate change. This was no longer about patience or optimism. It was about urgency. And once the final whistle blew, the Browns were headed straight for a decision they could no longer delay, one that would determine the future of the franchise. If the Browns actually decide to bring Jon Gruden into the building, the future of the franchise would shift in a way few people fully understand. This wouldn't be a small adjustment or a quiet transition. It would be a complete reset of how the organization operates. From how the offense is built to how players are developed to how the team carries itself every single day. And the ripple effects would touch everyone, starting with the quarterback the franchise refuses to waste. Rumors suggest Gruden sees Shedeur Sanders as the kind of quarterback he loves working with. Confident, quick thinking, and dangerous when put in the right system. For a coach who built his reputation on molding passers, that combination is hard to ignore. And if those speculative reports are accurate, Gruden wouldn't just tweak the offense, he would redesign it from the ground up. Faster reads, more modern concepts, a structure built specifically around Shedeur's strengths instead of forcing him into something outdated. Pair that with Jim Schwartz potentially stepping in as head coach, and the Browns could end up with one of the most balanced coaching duos in the league. A defensive architect who commands respect, and an offensive specialist who thrives on creativity. That kind of stuff could transform Cleveland into a team that finally plays complementary football, the thing fans have been begging for. But this move wouldn't just impact the playbook. It would reshape the identity of the team. Gruden is intense, detail-obsessed, and famously demanding. Players either grow under that pressure or get replaced by someone who can. And with Haslam reportedly eager to capitalize on Shedeur's star power, the Browns might be preparing for a culture where urgency replaces patience. Of course, there are risks. Big personalities can clash. Expectations can rise faster than results, and bringing in someone like Gruden would guarantee national attention, the kind Cleveland hasn't handled well in the past. But if the Browns believe the current path is wasting elite talent and shrinking their window, then a bold move might feel like the only move. And that leads to the biggest question of all. If this overhaul really happens, will it be the turning point Cleveland has been chasing for decades? Or the gamble that sends the franchise into another storm? Either way, nothing would ever look the same again. When you step back and look at everything surrounding the Browns right now, it becomes clear that this moment isn't just another rough patch or another chapter in a long history of frustration. This is a crossroads, a point where every decision carries weight, every rumor sparks a reaction, and every move behind closed doors could reshape the identity of the franchise for years to come. Cleveland isn't simply dealing with a coaching debate. They're staring at a transformation that feels bigger than anything they've experienced in the last decade. The whispers about Jon Gruden didn't appear out of thin air. They surfaced because the organization finally reached a point where doing nothing felt more dangerous than making a dramatic change. Combine that with a defense ready to dominate, a fan base desperate for something real to believe in, and a young quarterback who carries more spotlight than any rookie in recent Browns history. And suddenly, standing still is no longer an option. Jim Schwartz rising inside the building only added to the shift. Stefanski's future growing uncertain pushed things even further. And at the center of it all, Shedeur Sanders unintentionally became the force pulling the franchise toward a new direction. His upside, his popularity, and his potential made it impossible for ownership to ignore what wasn't working anymore. But here's the truth. Bold decisions don't come without consequences. If the Browns bring in Gruden, promote Schwartz, or overhaul the entire coaching staff, they're stepping into territory filled with risk, pressure, and expectations the team hasn't carried in years. The national spotlight would return instantly. Every move would be judged. Every mistake would be magnified. And every success, if it comes, would feel earned in a way that changes everything. So the real question isn't whether a change is coming. It's what happens after it arrives. Will this be the turning point that finally launches Cleveland into the future fans have been begging for? Or the gamble that sends the franchise spiraling into another cycle of chaos? Only one thing is certain. The Browns are on the edge of something huge, and the entire NFL is watching to see which way they fall.